All right, well, welcome everyone. It's good to be with you and good to have all of you here today to talk about GA4 and answer any questions that you have. I'm just going to say from the outset that this particular chat is brought to you really by the Foxwell Founders PPC community. And what we've attempted to start is a community of PPC professionals, people that do things on not only just Google ads, but Bing ads, but with analytics and with YouTube and everything else in between that you can imagine that goes under that umbrella of PPC. We have an existing founders community, and that's really for paid social people mostly. And so we're building a complementary community to it with the Founders PPC. So I have a special rate for those of you that aren't already members that we actually only have 2 more of. But if you get it here today, you'll be able to get it in the chat, but otherwise, and if 2 more people sign up, then we're done with that rate forever. So want to probably hop on that if you can to join our community, but we have 50 experts in PPC that are over there that are there to basically answer your questions. I spent about 6 months really talking and recruiting a lot of these people. And 3 of them join us today. Actually, 4 of them. Dwayne is also here. Doesn't have his video on, which is totally fine. But I'll go ahead and have our panelists introduce themselves. And again, if you have questions, go ahead and ask them in the Q&A, and then we'll get rolling with them. But who wants to start by introducing themselves and what they like about the founders community or whatever else?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. My name is Kana Miller. I've been in digital marketing for close to 15 years now. I started using analytics back in like 2010 when Urchin was still kind of widely used. So I hope I've kind of been around the block a couple times. I appreciate the founders community because there's always someone smarter than me. And it's really good to kind of see that kind of feedback, what the real experts are doing.
Guess I'll go next. Hi, Nava Hopkins from Optimizer. I was elated to be asked to be part of the Founders Club. I had actually seen a lot of the really great things going on the social side. If you're not already part of that, definitely check it out. It's really, really cool, really interesting, very vibrant community. So what's really nice about the Founders Club of PPC is actually how modularized all of the lessons are and the conversations are. There's some really brilliant perspectives there, some very technical, wonderful lessons being shared and insights being learned. So happy to be part of this conversation on GA4 and how we can think about it, but also happy to share insights on founders because it truly is a wonderful community.
Guess I'll go third. I'm Sam Tomlinson. Again, just like both Nava and Kana. Sorry, perfect. That said, it's been fantastic to be a part of this community. I've been friends with people in the social community for a long time. Was thrilled to be invited to join the paid search one, but been working in paid search for 8 years, and before that, I did 6 years in finance. So most of my background is like data-y stuff. I've just kind of changed what I've added up over the years. So really happy to be here.
Awesome. And Dwayne is here as well. Dwayne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sorry, I stepped away for a second because I went to get cheese.
All good.
Have lunch.
Yeah,
nice. My name is Dwayne. I've been in the group for, I guess it's been a few weeks. I'm gonna say a month because I was traveling the last couple of weeks and my whole perception of what day it is thrown off. But yeah, I know Nava and a few other people from other Slack groups or groups that I'm a part of. So I think it'd be good just to chat with them about GA4 in general, and just get to know more people in a semi-real world but virtual at the same time experience.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you. I'm really happy to have all of you. And for those of you that are panelists and are sharing your video, feel free to turn it on or off. I know it's lunchtime too, like Dwayne said. So obviously take care of yourself. And yeah, somebody asked, is the chat disabled? You can just ask it in the Q&A. It's easier to process the things that way. So if you have even general commentary, just feel free to generally comment and make it seem like it's a question. But go ahead and fire away on questions there. But I have a question right away. Kana, you and I have had a lot of discussions about GA4. We were on another training with specifically on something with GA4 that we worked on together. What do you think what's the biggest roadblock that you've had in making this transition for a lot of your brands that you're working with?
Honestly, actually implementing the transition hasn't been that hard. I mean, we really encourage like all of our clients to put everything through Tag Manager, outside of like some of the native integrations that like Shopify has. So actually getting GA4 up and deployed has not really been too tricky. It's really more about getting the insights out of GA4 that I think is really the biggest difference. Like comparing Universal Analytics to GA4, the way it works is a little bit different, and a lot of that's just kind of having to sort of relearn where things are. But I know I've kind of voiced this, like I'm frustrated with some of the capabilities out of the box. It seems like it's a step, maybe one step forward, two steps back in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And my other question is, Sam, real quick on what you've done a lot of these transitions. What have you found have been the common roadblocks that clients are having a hard time getting a handle on?
I think the biggest one for most of our clients, and most ones I've worked with personally, are really getting them to rethink about their data structure. Like most people that we've done this with started, or they set up UA in 2012. The people that set that up are long gone, but no one really bothers to update it because, again, for a lot of like legacy brands, the lead form tracks, yay, we don't have to think about anything else. But now with GA4, we're obviously going to them, we're talking about parameters, we're talking about additional data we should be passing, we're talking about workflows, we're talking about connecting to the CRM. And it's like getting a whole plan in place and a map for, hey guys, this is going to look different, this is going to work different, but we need it. Let's take this opportunity to not just flip a switch, but also to make it a little better for you moving forward. Because candidly, you haven't really invested in your analytics or your tracking for like a decade, which I think is probably pretty common for a lot of brands.
Totally. Yeah. It's something that has been the biggest one for me too, is that, you open up Pandora's box and then you realize all the other shit you never had set up properly. And I speak from experience in this regard. And I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. But just bringing a little perspective too from the conference, Dwayne, you just went to Brighton SEO conference and you were a speaker there and a presenter, and I know Nava, you did as well. So I'd be curious to hear your perspectives on, Dwayne, if you want to go first, what you think were some nuggets on GA4 that you wanted to take, I mean, that you took away from being there or from some of your experience with it thus far?
I think overall people realize Google's probably not going to push back that July 1st date. So that hope and prayer that you wouldn't have to make the transition is probably out the window at this point. I think for a lot of our clients, to Sam's point, like we've taken on that role of trying to make sure their data in Google Analytics is organized, just because like we use Google Analytics on a pretty much daily, if not weekly basis for maybe smaller clients. So making sure data from whether it's email or SMS or other channels are piping in there, so we kind of understand where does paid ads sit within the hierarchy of what they're doing. And paid ads doesn't need to be first, it doesn't need to be last, it doesn't matter where it is, but where does it sit and sort of contribute to their business? Because our clients aren't going to do it because some are small as 3 people and they're 2 founders and an admin person, to even teams where they're 25 or 50 people. They're working on a dozen other things, and though tracking is important, there's no one who like sits and thinks about it, gets nerdy and stuff like that. And from our perspective, that's fine, because us taking that on means we get to spend more time with GA4, and whether I love or hate GA4 is irrelevant in my perspective. I just have to learn it because I've got no other choice. Clients aren't going to pay for another tool. I don't want to pay for another tool out of my own pocket. So I might as well just learn it and figure it out at the end of the day, because it's the card I'm dealt, right? You might as well just play the cards you're dealt versus trying to fight Google, because Google's going to do what Google does.
Nava, do you have any comments on that question?
I do actually. One of the things I found really fascinating, I had a delightful breakfast with one of the leaders of the GA4 workshop, actually at Brighton SEO. And she was really surprised at how many people still hadn't made the migration and still hadn't backed up their data. And I think what this is actually going to do very practically and pragmatically is illustrate what data sets we actually cared about and were central to our business, and which ones we liked having because it was data and we paid for it. So we were like, oh, we should have it. But it actually wasn't necessarily as useful. I'm actually reminded very much of Egan's GA4 workshop that he did for another founders gathering. And you made some really good points about what data sets we care about, what questions do we ask of the data. So just in terms of conference perspective, I Bright and SEO drilled home for me. Abroad, people are already adopting things or have kind of already checked out on, I don't care about retaining my data, I'm just going to move on. I think it's more here where we're maybe clinging to control, that there's a little bit more friction. And so it's really just a matter of what data sets do we actually care about? What do we need? And focusing on setting up what we need and brainstorming around those sorts of questions.
Cool. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, welcoming Egan, who's actually my neighbor and also a GA4 expert and friend of mine. So Egan's a panelist here, and an agency owner. And so Egan, welcome. He's here to answer your questions for you as well. I'm going to dive in really briefly, right actually on some of the things. So there's already been a couple of questions that have been answered. Joey asked, I guess my first question is about ecom tracking. UA had that ecom toggle button, making it easy. When I first integrated GA4 for ecom, I got a long piece of code from the tag team and that worked. Is this still the common method of GA4 ecom tracking? And Nava wrote, it can be, depends on your setup. The more complicated setups do require more code. Otherwise, that long snippet or through GTM is ideal. Google Tag Manager is ideal. So Joey, if you have a follow-up question on that, please let us know. And Larry also asked about the GA4 equivalent of UA views, which is essentially the same thing, but you set it up ironically in the audiences section of admin, and Nava answered that one as well. So I appreciate that, Nava, for your time there, or for your answers there. But anyway, anybody else who's watching this, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the question and answer segment here on Zoom. Brian, brand owner and celebrity cycling legend, asked, is there a suggested checklist to make sure you've covered the major areas of GA4 migration, especially in Shopify? Google's constantly sending updates suggesting we've not finished, but it seems like this may be a blanket warning versus specific to us. Anyway, who wants to take that one? Egan, do you have thoughts on that right away?
Yeah, I think the question is, do you have the data you need? And oftentimes that's basic product tracking, revenue tracking. If you see that flowing in and it's correct, you most likely have what you need. And it's time to just kind of create your reports and figure out where to find the data you need. I've found the alerts and notifications very noisy as well. So you kind of have to, buckle your own safety belt on it. Like, just make sure you have what you need and use your judgment there.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah, I was going to say
I think
that's probably just blanket emails at the end of the day. Like our client just got one an hour ago. They forwarded me and I'm like, we already have this set up, because I think if you don't use Shopify's app, they'll send you more emails versus if you do. But if you don't check the setting they think is right, they'll just send you more emails. So yeah, to Egan's point, if you've got the data you want, I'd say just ignore the email. It's
kind of like when the Facebook outage last week and all of the budget was spent by 8 a.m. Pacific. And then they sent me an email about how to, a workshop on how to learn to pace your ads correctly. I was like, great, perfect. I love that for me. That's fantastic. Sam, go ahead, Kena. Yeah, please.
I'll also just add on that one. Yeah, like if you're using Shopify's like GA4 integration out of the box, most of what you need is already going to be there. I would say just in your GA4 admin settings, double check that if you're using multiple domains that you've got cross domain tracking set up properly. But
that's such a good call. Yeah.
I'll chime in real quick just because I see Julie in the panelists section also. Founders Club, PPC chat, all of these places typically also have the ad networks and the vendors that we're working with in the group. So there's no harm in putting those questions. One of the reasons why Julie typically will foster such useful conversations is she's able to pull in those really meaningful experts. Same thing with Andrew. So definitely don't be afraid to raise your hand and chime in, because you might actually end up being in a case study or in a content piece from those networks as they help you solve that problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a thank you for the nice softball, Nava. I think, one of the reasons that I started the founders communities originally, we sounded the paid social one 2 years ago in June, is because I felt alone. And I feel like a lot of us, even though we work at a company or maybe you work in a brand, you feel alone and you feel like you don't have somewhere where you can actually ask questions. Because I feel personally, when I ask questions on Twitter, sometimes I feel like I'll be flamed, and like I'm not interested in that. It's not like a super vulnerable place. Whereas our membership is anything goes, right? You have a place, you have a resource for, in the case of Founders PPC right now, for the plan that we have there that's in the chat, $127 a month, you have a place you can ask that question, and you have 50 experts there that are willing to help. So no question is a bad one. Sam, you were going to say something, and then we'll move on to another question.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
I think the big one for us is usually just making sure you have your funnel set up, because UA kind of did that by default. And GA4 is maybe not really. So I think it's just important, especially if you're doing ecom, to make sure that you have your cart and you can watch the progression. Just like, it's kind of nice to have that set up, and making sure that that works for you. So you're getting the right data at the end, but also you're getting the data in each of those intermediate steps. And for Shopify, sometimes that involves tinkering just a little bit with your checkout.liquid file. So just making sure that that is copacetic. So the end is right, and the how you got there is generally right too, is good.
Cool. I think it's a really good call. Somebody asked, let's see, let me go to this other question. Somebody asked, would you find it easier to use the manage GA4 migration link to transfer info into GA4 or start from scratch, essentially? Nava asked, answered that it's not about what's easier, it's about what will serve you best. If you're a simple site, the auto migration is probably fine. Everyone else should probably set up your own property. Any other comments on that from our expert panelists?
And that's pretty much right. Like, but it also depends. Like, it's not just what you're, I guess the flip side of that question is, are you happy and satisfied with the data you are getting out of UA, or are there other things that you want? Because if there are other things that you want, the auto migration will not capture them. It will take what you have and kind of lift and shift it-ish. But if you're like, hey, I would really love to know, like, form names is a thing for a lot of our clients. Like, I just want to know what form name it was, or what service did they ask for in the form, so I can further segment and do some analysis on, are you coming in for, like, I have a real estate client, right? Are you coming in for a townhouse or an apartment? Okay, that's a really interesting form. We've never bothered to catch it. So the auto migration wouldn't capture that, but you could via a parameter.
So one thing I'll add to my answer, because it was a fairly quick one. Just because you do the auto migration doesn't mean you're done setting it up. So even if you take that easy button and you push that through, that doesn't mean that you're not going to set up your own additional events or audiences, and that you might not customize some of your cards. So there's no getting out of turning GA4 into your data analysis tool. Where I think people get intimidated is that they just get that blank canvas and they don't know where to start. So if you truly are a simple site, there is value in having kind of that brainstorming done a little bit for you, and then you can iterate off of it. But everyone else, take an hour out of your day, sit and think about what questions you want your data to answer, and then go ahead and set up your event, set up your audiences, set up your cards to answer those questions, because it is going to be a disservice to you if you're anything other than basically a one-pager site to just go with auto migration, because you're not going to capture, as Sam said, really anything, or not much of anything.
Yeah, great points. So let's see. Next question. Should I use GA4 tag or Google Ads tag to track the purchase? Which one is better?
I can chime in on that one.
Yeah.
The Google Ads tag. I know with GA4, I've seen a couple instances where it doesn't quite capture as as much as the Google Ads tag, or the volume doesn't quite line up. Also with your Google Ads tag, you got a little bit more control over your attribution windows. So if you're running everything through Tag Manager, it shouldn't really be too much more difficult to set that up for Google Ads.
Cool. That.
Awesome. All right. I've always done my work. Nava, you said you're going to answer this one. This is fine. I've always done my work 100% in the Google Ads interface or through a third-party platform. As such, I have little experience with UA. Where would you recommend someone starting to learn how to implement and use GA4 that has little to no UA experience?
Oh man, ignorance is bliss. You don't know what you're missing.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of nice, to be honest.
Yeah.
Nava, you said you had some comment. You wanted to chat about that one.
Yeah. So the main reason I wanted to chat about this live is I actually think it's a reasonable discussion given the scope of the panelists that we have here. We essentially have agency, in-house, and SaaS all represented, and I think it's reasonable for us to talk about what does GA4 look like and how does implementing GA4 for our clients or for ourselves look like. My personal take on this is that GA4 is one of those examples like Merchant Center where it's really intimidating and it's really scary until you start playing with it and until you start just building out your a random feed in Google Sheets. So I really cannot overstate, take the moment to build that hour of brainstorming time. The other thing just to be aware of though, when you are very used to using third-party tools, sometimes those third-party tools automate quite a bit that actually take away some of the strategic thinking that you'll want to actually invest. So it is worth actually taking this time to maybe look at how much am I in the know about all the things and how much do I need to be in the know? Because that will also help you answer what kind of data do I need to track? Going back to that original question of what data am I storing? What data am I looking to capture? Because at the end of the day, if you don't already have your GA4 set up and if you don't already have your data backed up, odds are that data really didn't matter that much. And so you're going to learn what truly matters to you very, very quickly by what you choose to set up right now. But the easiest way to learn is just, there's a quick click button, set up your GA4 and just play in the tool.
Cool.
Yeah, I would echo, just click around. That's kind of what I do.
I think the only thing I'd add is like there's a YouTube channel called Loves Data. It's got good videos on like GA4 and stuff in general. So if you're into videos and YouTube, that's a good thing that our team uses, and I think clients have used it as well. If you prefer the more, someone show me how to do it / I want to look at a video versus reading lots of text.
Good call.
And Andrew, do you have any like training materials on GA4 in the
No, I mean it's
Founders course?
We have you know, the webinar that Egan is doing or that he did and we have a couple of other things that you and I kind of have done you know, with other members talking about it. I mean, it's one of those things that I haven't created training around yet that's very official, because I think surfacing the way that we're going through this and like the realities versus what Google is suggesting is always a good place to start, and like let us go through, kind of walk through the fire together first, and then be able to come out and say, okay, so this is what it said, this is what they say, this is what we actually recommend. But you know, this is one of those things of continuing to have more conversations about it over time for members, and making sure that we're supporting people that are doing that. I just want to welcome Gabriel, who is a GA4 expert, Google Analytics expert, who
Hello.
Works for a colleague of mine, who's named Milan in Slovakia, is a great partner of ours. So he's one of our panelists as well, one of the other experts in the group. You know, Julie brought up, are there any differences in what people should do for non-ecom sites in their migration and setup? And Egan said, you know, set up your lead gen and other conversion events. Any other big differences there that you want to be sure of as we go through? So it's not just, this isn't just all ecom focused.
I think, yeah, conversion events is a big one. And, you know, one big difference between how Universal Analytics really, for a lot of lead gen sites who are capturing events, had this set up in GA4. With Universal Analytics, all your events could be categorized by event category, event label, and event action. And that was helpful in kind of slicing and dicing reports. With GA4, everything is an event, and you can pass custom event parameters, an infinite number on top of those events. So if you're used to setting up and kind of like a hierarchy of events under, you know, a category and then an action underneath that and then a label, you can still sort of accomplish the same thing using the custom parameters, but you're going to have to kind of rethink that taxonomy a little bit.
The other thing that I'd mention on this point really specifically, and the thing I've seen people screw up more than anything else, is capitalization matters on every parameter. If you capitalize event, capital E, lowercase e, those are two distinct events. They will not be counted the same. So you end up with people that, like, you know, now if you go find ChatGPT or something and have them write a regular expression to like meld their medley of misery together. Just don't. Like, make your life good, please.
Yeah, all of GA4 standard events are all lowercase, so I lowercase everything with GA4.
Yep. It's
On that
whatever
note,
Taylor Swift. Go ahead, Nava, sorry.
No, sorry, I'm interrupting. You finish and then I'll interject.
Oh no, it's fine. I was just making a Taylor Swift joke. That's all.
Well, on that note, primary and secondary conversions, this is a really important time to audit your primary and secondary conversions, because if you're going to be importing your GA4 events and those parameters in, God forbid you accidentally create two because of the title casing issue, that's going to be real bad for smart bidding. So definitely make sure that you're auditing which conversion events are being imported in and which are your primary and secondary. And just in case anyone isn't aware, primary means it's going to feed into the algorithm and into your reporting. Secondary means that it is going to be just data that is shared and you can see it, but it's not going to actually influence your cost per acquisition. It's not going to influence the bidding. So very okay to track everything, not okay to tell the ad networks to say this is important.
So a couple things. One is those of you that are here, if you have questions, feel free to fire them up in the chat. We're happy to answer them. We have a few more here, and then we can get into some other piece. Joey asked on the follow-up and the reply, is there a standard code, Nava, that you're using through GTM to Shopify stores?
So it's not so much necessarily a standard code, it's just the standard integration. But I would actually defer to Dwayne. Dwayne does a lot of Shopify setup. So if you have any custom code recommendations.
Yeah, we don't have any custom code recommendations. I mean, when we set up GA4 for clients, like we were just setting up inside their store back in 2021 when there was no app and stuff like that. So I think as long as you've got code pushing so you can track things like revenue and purchases and events like that, then you're good to go. You know, GA4 is not easy, but it's not complex. I think, like a few people said earlier, as long as you spend a bit of time with it every day, just make sure you've got the data in there that you want to have.
I think the big thing is just making sure your data layer is configured properly, because usually all of your GA4 stuff comes in via your data layer. So if that's set up properly and you have the events to pull or the parameters configured, you can really easily pull that in. But if not, you're going to need to write code to push both your product level data and your transaction level data so that it can be properly understood in GA4.
And I would say for most e-commerce shops now, you shouldn't really be needing to get into the data layer. Like Shopify has their native GA4 integration that they just released now. And Joe, I saw your follow-up question. The standard integration should now have e-commerce tracking. And your original question, you know, it was a toggle in Universal Analytics. You don't need to do anything in your GA4 setup now. E-commerce is enabled by default as long as you're just pushing that data in, presumably through the Shopify integration. You should be good. If you are kind of hard coding that integration, like Sam said, with the data layer stuff, correct me guys if I'm wrong. I think if you had enhanced e-commerce in universal analytics, that can pretty much be used with GA4 now. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Because most of any standard, like say post 2017, 18 enhanced ecom is going to use basically a data layer. So in that case, it's really just making sure you have the right parameters in there, which is part of like that initial audit. And then 2 is making sure that you've properly recognized them in GA4, which is actually feels very intimidating right up until you do it.
Yeah. But Joey, don't make it hard on yourself. Just use the standard integration.
Use the integrate. Yeah. Yes, please.
Well, I just want to remind everyone that real quick, feel free to ask any questions that you have, follow-up questions on what we're talking about. We have a panel of experts here to help you on anything that you need GA4 related. This webinar is brought to you by the Foxwell Founders PPC community. I have a link in the chat for you in reference to a pricing that literally will be gone probably today. So if you want to get in on that price, go ahead and do that. Or you can check it out at foxwelldigital.com/all caps PPC. I'm going to get to some of more of the questions that we have here. But Gabriel, just to chime in as you, one of our experts, and you coming in, and I know it's like a weird time where you are, so I appreciate you joining. In terms of a lot of you shared a big, I think it was a dashboard, and what we're doing in the membership already. What have you seen in general in GA4 transitions that has been a common, roadblocks people feel like they're having a really hard time with, or clients are having a hard time getting an understanding of?
I think the biggest pain is using the auto migration in GA4 and all these automatic step that Google gives you. So now, for example, today I had a pop-up screen. I don't know if anybody of you had it, with a countdown of stopping universal analytics. And even if I have my own GA4 property, like 2 years ago, we set it up, it's pushing me to create a new one and to auto migrate all the events, the audiences, and everything from the universal analytics. I think that if we are working with it so every day, so we don't do it, but a lot of people who is not used to the GA4, they are doing it, and they have multiple implementations. They slow down their website and they mess it all up.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I think some of this always, right, in any of these spaces, when we go through any sort of thing in digital marketing, the group therapy aspect of being in community is always helpful. Of being like, do you also see this? Because this is another interesting thing. Sam was going to answer a question, and thank you, Gabriel, for answering that. Will there be an overlap between attribution models in GA4, last non-direct versus DDA? Sam, what do you think of that?
Yeah, so there is, I guess the first thing is, in terms of overlap, if you want to compare them, that tool still does exist in GA4, which is neat. It's just under advertising now. There's a model comparison tool under attribution, and you can pull in your preferred by ads, which is cross-channel last click. And then you can also pull in DDA. You can also pull in your standard stuff, although some of that is going away. But yeah, you can still view the overlaps. And like Kiana was saying, if you're doing ads tracking, the other thing you can do is track primary using your Google Ads tracking tag. Please do that. And then you can also import your conversions into Google Ads as a secondary, not used for attribution, and just compare the two and make sure that what GA is saying in terms of an attribution and what your analytics is saying in terms of attribution kind of jive in one screen. just to make sure that there's not a gap there.
That's a good call. Okay. Joel asked, can you talk more about custom parameters to tell which form was completed or to see what was selected on the form, if I heard you correctly? Gabriel said you want to answer this, and then we can get to any of the other experts.
Yeah, it's generally custom parameters are one of the biggest advantages of GA4. A few weeks ago, I did an implementation for a client who had like 120 events in Universal Analytics regarding the promotions and some coupons and all that stuff. And we managed to reduce it to like 30 events because we use the same event called view promotion or other promotion related custom events, and we used custom parameters to identify that promotion. So in your Universal, you had one event per one promotion type. Now you can have one event for all promotions called view promotion, put their custom parameter, and identify the promotion type by this parameter. You shouldn't forget to register this parameter as a custom parameter in the GA4 admin, and then you can use it in your explorations and create reports.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
I think I guess the question is just, how do you do it? Like, I think you're 100% right on the technical piece. It's just a lot of times any data that's in the data layer, if you're comfortable with Tag Manager, anything that's in the data layer, like if you just go through with a demo, you can actually see in the data layer, oh, my form name is here. Oh, my form fields are here, and push all of that in. And anything that's in that data layer, you can then grab and pass as parameters to GA4. So whether that's, again, the form name, what value was picked. Like I have a recruitment client where we want to know which position they applied for. Was it an RN? Was it an LPN? Was it a CNA, RNA? Whatever it is, we can grab all that because it's all in the field that's in submitted. And then we can use one event, to your point, Gabriel, and segment all of that out. But it's all just taking from the data layer and then making sure our parameters.
It's a good point. You have to have a good data layer. By the way, are you guys using any of those tools like Elevar or Listen Layer? These tools are working with the data layer, and they you can change your data layer user-friendly way with them.
Do you find that it helps with the human error proofing? Because that's honestly where I think most people get stuck there.
Yeah, because you don't have to touch the source code, or you don't need a developer. You can easily change the data layer and put some additional fields to that.
Yeah,
maybe I can link them in the chat.
Yeah, please do. Interesting. It's I'm going to go on to another question here. Brian said maybe it's out of scope, but what are companies like Fuel doing about GA4 that we'd miss absent their services? We installed Mixpanel and Fuel, and it kind of goes with what you're talking about, but I'm seeing no difference in getting answers to our data questions. Anybody have thoughts on that?
Mixpanel specifically I can talk about. I don't really use Fuel, but I have 2 clients on Mixpanel. So I guess there's 2 parts to this question, right? The first is, are you saying that Mixpanel is not answering your data questions and you're trying to figure out if GA4 can, or, or are you saying I'm just not getting answers anywhere, so what do I do? If it's Mixpanel specifically, like, I think the big advantage to Mixpanel has always been like their user ID tracking was kind of neat, but candidly, like 2 of my clients that I work with that are on Mixpanel, GA4 is generally fine without Mixpanel. Is kind of the result we've come to as well. It's a very good overall data engine, I would say. And we really haven't noticed a difference. It's minuscule. And obviously the cost of Mixpanel is not insignificant. So yeah, I think GA4 is fantastic in terms of what it does on the event side, or on the app and the user tracking side. But I don't know Fueled, so I can't speak to that one.
Got it. Well, if we'll go ahead and give people a couple more minutes to ask any questions. I'm a big believer in meetings don't have to be, including webinars that are even slightly promotional webinars. They don't have to be longer than they need to be. To be honest with you, we're all busy. So if there aren't any other questions, we can end this early, which is totally fine. Anybody else have any other comments about gaining confidence, continuing along transitions? And of course, if you have questions ongoing, we'd love to see you in the Foxwell Founders membership to talk through some of these things and continue to support you as time goes on. But any expert panelists, any other things to say for the good of the order?
Well, one thing I'm actually, oh, go ahead, Sam.
Oh, no, it's fine. You're good, Nava.
One thing I'm actually really curious for everyone's perspectives is, do we see GA4 replacing some of the reporting tools because of how complex and in-depth it is, or do we see it still being kind of a silo for certain bits of our marketing, and we're still going to import all of that information into other things? So basically, how much do we all see GA4 being our source of truth? Because I know on my side, one of the things I'm the most excited about with GA4 is how much it's kind of breaking down the divide between PPC and SEO. I think it's enabling us to be far more collaborative with our SEO friends. But I'm really curious what everyone else is thinking in terms of GA4. Are you seeing it as your single source of truth? Are you seeing it as a data source amongst many data sources?
If I may jump in, I think the goal of Google here with GA4 is to replace, as you mentioned, to replace some BI tools. All this stuff like custom events, custom parameters, BigQuery connection, everything. It's going towards replacing some other tools. But the problem here, what I see in most cases for the users of GA4, it's too complicated for them. So there are much more possibilities than in UA, but it seems for now it seems to be more complicated. So they need help implementing and also using it.
I could not agree with you more. It's actually really funny that I actually think GA4, when set up correctly, solves most people's problems, but most people are not going to invest the time to figure it out. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that you glossed over, Gabriel, but one of the really interesting things about GA4 is the BigQuery integration by default. Like, that's been incredible because we can pipe data into BigQuery and make sure we have it, which is really nice, and run, significantly more explorations on it. But in terms of like killing reporting tools, please do. Like, please make them die. Sorry if anybody here is a reporting tool person, but like, please make them die. I think it's great that you can get everything in one dashboard. We can export everything to BigQuery to back it up for the more than I think GA4 carries for 14 months before it does the data cycling thingy. So please, yes, make that better. And, as much as I don't like LLMs for some things like search, I love them for things like reporting, where you can literally just, throw in one of the many OpenAI extensions into BigQuery and be like, tell me this, and it will do it. It's really neat. Like, democratizes data a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I appreciate you. I appreciate all of you joining us. And Kana, those that haven't had a last word. Dwayne, anything else to say before we wrap it up?
I have a question I can pose to the other experts here. This is kind of on the data analysis side. Once you have all your data in GA4, how do you start digging in and using this? Can I share my screen? This would be a little easier just to walk real quick.
You should be able to.
Yeah, cool. So one thing that I'm really used to doing in universal analytics is This is a pretty simple acquisition report. Shows our channels right here. The timeline visualization, it shows, your top 5 from the list here. If I wanted to dig into something like email, which isn't shown here on the list, in Universal Analytics, I'm pretty used to just filtering by, something in the table and then having my visualization update, but that doesn't happen with GA4. Have you guys encountered this or found an easy solution to kind of get around this without going and building like a whole custom exploration, which ends up taking a long time?
I spent 2 hours last week with this to come up with a solution, and only explorations to do that. If anybody else has a better solution, then tell us.
Yeah, I've heard another option is just get your stuff into Data Studio or Looker now, and do it that way.
I mean, that might be what keeps the reporting tools, the data tools alive, is that they make a really easy press the button and it's done. But my money is on, by January, we will have really easy data visualization because everyone's going to be on it. And I don't think Google's going to be able to keep people happy with just the static view. Like they'll need to have that data visualization component in there. And Google tends to depreciate things that don't get used and emphasize things that are requested and that have high usability. So this is one of those things that, be loud about it, be aggressive about it, and we might get it once everyone's forced to be on GA4.
Thank you for asking that question. That's a good one. That's a deep cut, as we would say, Kane. But at least that there's no other answer that people have found. So, well, for those of you that have joined us, thank you. For the experts that have joined us, I very much appreciate you doing this. And again, if you're not a Foxwell Founder member, you'll be getting a follow-up email from me of this. And if you are a Founder member, it will also be uploaded to your member area. So for you to view later with timestamps and things of that nature. So I appreciate all of you. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you at any time. And I look forward to continuing to serve all of you in the community. And thank you again. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.